In this video, we are going to build a simple rigged arm. So it's not going to be too complex. We'll do a little bit of auto patching just to clean up at the elbow and see how we can look for strategies of how to build the elbow, wrist, shoulder as we connect this arm to a body, a little bit of drawing substitution so we can have some fun with the hand. So the first thing I want to do on this is I want to create the colors I'm going to use. So I'll make a new color. This will be my line. You can choose whatever colors work for you as you are building your project. And then I'm going to make a color. This will be my skin. So figure out which colors work best for you. And I want to go a little more on the blue side, looking how my two colors are going to work. There's no right or wrong for what we're doing here. So with this, what I like to do when I'm working on something like this is just to do a basic sketch layer. So with that, I usually do my sketch with the brush. So I am going to, with this, we're going to be doing an arm in profile sort of view, so that if I have body and with that you could have a head too if you want. I'm not going to worry too much about that. What I do care about is my arm. So thinking about where the arm attaches at the shoulder. And for this, it's best to, right now, we're going to draw the arm straight, either down or horizontal with the arm extended. So I'm thinking about where is the shoulder, upper arm, where the elbow is going to be, form, how I want that to look, where the wrist is going to happen, and then how I, whatever type of hand I wish to attach to my character. So I can decide that maybe they're only going to have 3 fingers, 4, they could have a claw, pincers, pincers, whatever you decide you want your arm to be. But this just gives me a starting point or a guide for it. Now if I turn on my light table, when I get to the next layer to start drawing here, then it's going to gray this out a little bit. So with that, we need to add a couple layers here. And the 3 layers that I'm going to worry about right now are just going to be the arm layers. So we will have 3 layers for the arm. So I'm going to have my upper arm. Now remember, we can't put spaces in. I can represent spaces with an underscore or a dash, or we can camel case it, uppercase, lowercase mixing. That works. So we'll do upper arm, lower arm, and finally hand. So now I have my 3 layers. I can close that. As I promised, that is going to gray out. So now as we build our line, one thing we want to make sure is that we are on the line drawing layer, not on the color underlayer overlay. We want to be on the line. And with that, I am going to create my lines using the pencil tool, and then we'll create our fills just as solid color. So as we do this, I need to decide how big I want it to be. And when we're doing things with auto patch and trying to create clean lines, it's best to have a mono thickness line. And I'm going to shrink my brush size down to 4. And I'm going to bump my smoothing up to, I like to be somewhere between 15 and 20. When I do that, it just gives me a little better hand. So now one thing is that trying to do horizontal lines here, and I put 20 here when I didn't mean to. I wanted that to be 4. Let's try that again. That's a better size. Okay, let's just get rid of those lines there. So when I am drawing with my pencil tool and wanting to draw a line, it's often easiest to be pulling downward or at a slight angle that's following. Now I'm left-handed, so it wants to go in this direction. If you're right-handed, you're going to be more commonly pulling in that direction. That is not a comfortable direction to draw. So if we hold down Control and Alt, it allows us to spin our animation wheel. If you're on a Mac, it's Command and Option. So with that, I can now spin my animation wheel, and I can create my lines for my arm. Now when I get to the elbow, I am closing it. Now we do have line builder on, so if I draw a line and I draw another line nearby, it wants to automatically connect those two. So that's a hammer icon in my tool option. So if we don't want that and want our lines to be separate, so if I want to add maybe some detail lines in, we'll want to turn off line builder, so that way I can add in if I want to put in a little slip there, a little bit of muscle. So if we want any sort of detail, we can put those in with it. I do like drawing with the line builder. It does help things a little bit. So now I have my upper arm. Now if I switch over to my lower arm, and I'm noticing that the purple and purple is proving to be a little bit difficult to see, so let's just select everything here and see how that looks. Yeah, so switching to red, it's going to be a little bit easier to see what is happening while I am drawing. It is also possible that when we work on a layer, there's this tiny icon. It looks, when we click on it, it kind of gives us a little person icon, and we can see how I can lower the opacity of a layer. So I can just make that sketch layer even less than what the light table is giving me to further lighten it. So that is another option that you can employ. So the tiny little thumbnail icon. So when you have a layer selected right next to the pencil, we can click on that and then set the opacity for a given layer while we are working. So now I'm going to move over to the lower arm. I'm going to rotate a little bit more. Go back and grab my pencil tool. With that, now one thing that I am going to do as I work with the pencil, we'll notice at the elbow we have the two are overlapping, and we're going to be okay with that because we're going to use the auto patch to create a joint. Now if I move in on the hand, in the hand layer, probably want to, with the hand we sometimes use auto patch, but not always. So we may want to not have auto patch on. So don't be afraid to rotate your drawing while you are working on it. And we got some weird effects. I am going to turn off my line builder right now because it is giving me some. Actually, it's not just line builder, but I need to pull my center line smoothing down a little bit. Trying to get some detail in here. It's giving me a little bit of trouble. So we're just trying to get some fingers. And one thing we're going to do with this is we are going to have a couple different hands that we work with, so we'll see how that works. Now to reset my view, Shift and the letter M resets our view back to original. Now I've decided I want to shrink this down a little bit. I just don't like how big it got in relation to everything else. So that's step one. We're creating some line art. Step two is we're going to want to fill it, but we don't want to fill our color on the line art layer. We want to fill it on the color layer. So what we need to do is we need to take the artwork that we just made and transfer a copy to our color art layer. So if I go into my drawing view, we can see there are no lines here. If I go to the line art, we can see, let me turn off that, so we can see that the lines are there. So the drawing view gives us that isolated view. We can turn on light table to see the other layers, but it gives us an isolated view of what's there. Now let's go back into our camera view. So if I select this artwork on the line art layer, we have this option here, create color art from line art. So I could copy paste this, fill it, delete the lines, and then I'd have the color on the color, but the easiest way is I just simply click that button. And just so we know, when we are working with the pencil tool, we do have an option to automatically create color art, so it automatically is doing it, but generally we draw and then we create that color art. Now if I switch into my drawing view, now we can see we just have the path here. There is no fill on it, there is no stroke, we just have the path. So this is where I can now use the paint bucket, grab the skin, and try and fill it. But I can see that my gap at the end here is a little bit too big for it to fill. So we got this gap. Probably want to clean that up, but I'm not going to worry about it too much right now. So a couple options. I could draw a line here, fill it, and delete the line. But if we go into the paint bucket, we do see that we have a option to close gap, where it will just close with a straight line, but I can also choose stroke. What stroke will allow me to do is to just draw a line, the same as if there was a pencil line there, so it creates another stroke. There is no fill with that, or now I can go back to my paint bucket and attempt to fill it. And as I'm attempting to fill it, it's not working because we do have a little gap right there. And one thing that's interesting is the gap sizes. When we have gaps occurring, one way to close the gaps without actually even having to draw these extra strokes is simply to zoom out, and that makes the gaps effectively smaller. And then we can close that gap, or fill that stroke, or fill that area. Now let's repeat the process. I go to the lower arm with the select tool, the black arrow. I select the lower arm. Notice I'm trying to select and nothing's happening because we're on the color art. So let's go back to line art, select that, click the button. So it's the two arcs with the arrows pointing down. That now created my color art, and now I can just simply and we have to grab the paint bucket to fill. I was like, why is it not working? Oh yeah, grab the paint bucket. Okay, go to the upper arm. In the upper arm here, once again, I can select it. Again, get on the line art, select it. So I've selected that. I don't really need to put those extra strokes down there. I just need the outline. Select that, fill, go to the color art, grab the paint bucket, fill. Now it's been filled. So now I have the beginnings of an arm here that we are going to animate. And just so it doesn't feel kind of as awkward, I'm going to just draw then a simple torso to exist with it. So I can grab the pencil tool, later on we'll look at adding in entire, rigging up entire characters, but for right now, and I'm on the wrong layer. Let's go to my line art layer. It's always a good practice to get into is make sure that you are creating whatever you're trying to create on the layer you intend to. So for this, I'm going to create my character on, or the head. Okay, don't like the shape of that. Let's try again. So I've created it on this same area. Now I can see down here it won't close. This is where I could use the stroke tool, but we don't really want to do that on the line art. So I'll select the line art, push that to the color art, so it pushes a copy to the color art, switch to the color art. I'll just go over here and select stroke so I can just close that off, go back to my paint bucket, go grab skin and fill and fill. Notice I used the trick, I zoomed way out, made all my gaps smaller so then I could paste it. Switch over to the animation tool, we'll see that we now have an arm and a body that it's attached to, and now it's time to do a little bit of rigging work. To build our arm so that it's rigged and able to be animated, what we need to do is establish a parent-child relationship with our different parts. But in order to do that, it's best to do it in the node view. So there are some ways that we could do it in our layer view, but that would be a much more limited option. It would be much harder to incorporate the auto patch, etc. So what we want to do is work in our node view. Now if I click on node view, I can see right now it looks like a mess. I see a bunch of these blue cables connecting these different nodes. Nodes are the little boxes that we see. So if I click on a node, we have different ways of organizing them. I can drag them around, but if I just click on one at the very bottom and say order node view up, click OK, it spreads everything out. You'll quickly realize that we've run out of room and need more room here. So let's do that. Now a nice trick is we can make our node view go full screen. In order to do that, I need to make sure that my node view is the active window, and I use Command or Control F to make the application go full screen. And now I don't want to be in any window except the node view where I see the red border around it, so not in camera, not in timeline, but in the node view. And I will hit Command or Control F one more time, and now that maximizes my node view so I have enough room to work. Once we get our nodes situated, we'll return back to our mixed window view so we can see a little bit of everything that's going on. So this original drawing node, that is the rough sketch that we made. So I'm just going to pull that down. We don't really need that up there. What we do care about are these 4 nodes, and we want to organize those. So to organize them, I'm going to use the Organize Horizontally button up at the top. So we had Order Node Up, Order Nodes Down, and then we have Organize Horizontally. So that spreads them out so they're all even, so we can see what's going on. Now we'll see that within the node view, our artwork layers, the named layers that we made, have these cables, these lines connecting them to the composite. That is where effectively they get mixed together, and then they go into our display node. That is where we get to see what is in the camera. And the right node, if I click on that, let's try again, click on the yellow box, it will show me how it's going to output. So it's going to show me different options. So I can output as an image sequence, I can output as a video file, I can choose options there, H.264, QuickTime. So we have a couple ProRes, lots of different options available to us that we can choose with this right node. It's also possible I can have more than one right node so that when I export my project, I can just say render the right nodes, and it will export out all those things that I've pre-configured ahead of time. So that can be a more advanced way of working. We're not going to worry too much about those right now. Display is what we see in the camera. Everything comes together into a composite. Over time, we'll be having lots of composites as we rig together basic characters. You can have as many composites as you want. It doesn't add to the weight of your file. It doesn't add to the weight of the render. It helps you to stay organized. So notice nodes are blue. They have these blue dots at the bottom, so those are the outputs, and they have a green dot at the bottom. The green dot is where we have our pegs that are going to be our pivot points that allow us to control our nodes and work with them. So when we animate, we don't animate layers directly, we animate their nodes. The nodes, or we animate their pivot points. So if I take a node and want to add a pivot point to it, there's a couple of different ways we can do it. The fastest and easiest is when I'm adding directly to one is Command or Control and then Shift and the letter P. And because all of those were highlighted, it did all of those individually. Now if I undo that, so again, with these drawing nodes highlighted, if I just do Command or Control P, we can see now there's one peg that's going to control all of them. Now if I look at a peg and see what it is, a peg has X and Y and Z positions, it has rotation, it has skews, we have a location for that pivot point, we have scale information, so it holds all of the numerical transformation that's being applied to our drawing. So if we think about doing cutout character animation, what we're doing is we're changing the position, scale, rotation, and skew of our different artwork layers across time. That is simply what is happening when we animate. And the nice part is when we work with pegs, we can separate things out. So we can have one peg that's handling just the rotation, one that's handling the translation or the moving across our camera view. So we can separate things out to create very complex and very controllable animations. Now if I create a peg and I don't want it, I can just highlight that peg and hit delete and it goes away. Easy enough. I can also, when they're selected like this, if I hit Command P, we have these scissors up here. It's the cable cutter. Now with the cable cutter, I can just go like that, drag across, and it cuts the cable. Super easy. Now let's just take that peg and get rid of it. So the most common way that we organize together a limb, and I'm going to now, typically every drawing layer will usually have its own peg. That's how we construct it when we're animating. Now I want what would in effect be a super peg, so if I move the lower arm, I want the hand to go with it. Because I don't want the arm I want to be able to adjust the arm, so it needs its own peg, but I also want it to have another peg, so I'm going to Command or Control Shift P, add another peg to it, and if I go here, I can now connect those. Now we're going to come back to the node here, view, in just a little bit. I'm just going to show you what that actually did. So by default, when I work with a node, so if I click on a node, we'll notice we have this blue dot in the center of the screen, and that blue dot is the pivot point. That's where it's being adjusted. So if I rotate this, we'll see it's rotating around that blue dot. So the pivot point always defaults to the center of the screen. So we need to move it, but to move it so it's permanently moved, we use the rotate tool. It's in our advanced animation tool on the top of the screen here. So we have translate and rotate. Rotate is considered the best one to use when you're setting up your character. Now I can move this over into what would be the wrist joint. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit so I can make sure I'm kind of aligning things more of where I want them. Now, if I just put this here at the elbow, now grab all of our animation will be done with the transform tool down right below the little running man. Now if I rotate this arm, we'll see it's now rotating at the elbow, but there's a little problem. The hand didn't go with it. Now let's undo that. I want the lower arm master and the lower arm to have the same pivot point, so I highlight both of those nodes. Now if I go and put this in at the elbow, like that, if I rotate, I can rotate that. And notice when I'm selecting things, they're turning yellow with the transform tool. That means I'm selecting the peg. But if I select the drawing, it turns kind of purplish magenta. So we don't want that. There are two ways to get around that. One is to select it and then to use the keyboard shortcut, the letter B. Just notice this node here is selected. If I hit B, I went to the peg. Now if I hit B one more time, we went up. So B brings us up, and Shift in the letter B will bring us down through our node hierarchy. So B and Shift B are the two things you want to remember. Now if we want to make it so that every time I, with the transform tool, click on an artwork layer and it selects the peg, we have an option over here called peg selection mode. I can click on that. So I click on that and notice it automatically is turning yellow. Now if I do Shift B, it does bring me down to it, but if I click on something, it selected the peg. Now notice the arm, you may be going, oh wait, that's problematic. We're not rotating from where we want to rotate. So I want a super peg that can move the whole arm, but I also want to be able to adjust it because there's times where we're going to be adjusting and, well, we're not scaling quite like that. I need to get that pivot point adjusted first before I do any changes. So before you ever move anything, you always want to reset it. And now if I look in my timeline, you'll see where I've started as I've been messing around. I'm getting keyframes showing up. So I'm going to just get rid of those. So then it returns it back to its original position. So I just click on the keyframe and delete them using the keyframe minus button, or just select it and hit delete. So we need a super peg for the arm. So again, select that peg and then Command Shift P, that adds one more, and now I can connect that. So now notice it highlights all three. So if I click here, it selects the upper arm. If I hit B, it moved up. Now to give both of these the same pivot point, I just highlight both nodes and then set that pivot point. That's kind of important. It's easiest to animate when you have these stacked nodes like that and they are following that same pivot point. So now if I animate the arm, we can see the arm goes down. I can click off, click on the forearm, hit B to choose the lower arm. Whoop. Oh, and while I was undoing things, I somehow, I hit undo too many times, so there is no pivot point set for those, but there will be here in just a moment. Okay, so now, oh, wrong tool, that's why it wasn't sticking. Now if I click here, notice how the pivot point is back at the beginning. We use the rotate tool, and the reason we use the rotate tool, the translate tool will allow me to move it as well. The advanced animation tools, if we change pivot points, it does a permanent change. So if you ever use one of these later on while you're animating, it will affect everything prior in your timeline, so you have been warned. So I select these two. These are the shoulder ones, the upper arm. So I will drag and set that in the shoulder. Now I select the lower two. But we use the rotate tool because then once I set it, then I can kind of test and figure out, are things moving correctly? And now, so we have the hand here, lower arm, upper arm, or lower arm super, upper arm master. Now if I use the transform tool, let's see, so that works. B to select the whole, the full one. Now I can click off, click on the forearm, hit B again. That moves the arm. Now as I do this, notice my joint here. I'm kind of not thrilled with that joint. So let's clear that keyframe. Bring the arm back here. And I'm thinking what I want to do is select these two, and we'll use the translate tool and do a permanent going to move the artwork over. Actually, we'll move the pivot point over. Use the rotate or translate. But then what I want to do is select the lower arm. Now, if I select the artwork here and move it, you'll see that it's not moving the stroke and the fill. And you may be like, well, gee, then why did we separate them? That's super annoying. But we do have the ability to select both. And if we use this option right here, apply to line and color, have that selected. So now I can select both, and I can move that over just a little bit. And we'll probably have to tweak the hand some. Adjust my view so I can see. Select those two pegs. Now let's see. That works better. So now I have a little better bend. Another option is we could adjust the artwork as well, but it moved it out a little bit. Now let's click on the hand. The hand is going to need to move to a new location. So we could just move the hand and the pivot point there. Oh, honestly, if you can put your hand that far over, you've kind of broken your wrist anyway. But it does seem that we want to move the hand out just a little bit more. Like rotate the hand. And this is part of why we use the rotate tool. So now I can rotate the hand and now it's not as broken. So that gives me better alignment. So going back to my animate tool here, let's just clear out a few keyframes. Oh. And another thing is when we're animating, we need to animate current frame. If I turn animate off, this is part of how now I can move these around without it introducing, oh wait, and put a keyframe in when I didn't mean to. Let's pull it out. And I got the keyframe again because I meant to choose animate off. When we have animate off, now let's delete the keyframe. So with animate turned off, we can move things around and we don't get keyframes. So now if I switch tools, let's see how that looks. That looks good. So when setting up your part, sometimes we want to turn animate off. The one downside of that is it's super easy to forget you have it turned off, and then when you start animating and you get partway down, you're like, why aren't I getting any keyframes? So you need to see the running man. So now when we have the running man, notice things are kind of yellowish green. Turn that running man off. Now everything is red. So it's trying to warn you, if you don't see yellow, even if you click on things, if I click here, if I don't see yellow, you're not going to be animating. And if I see, click on it and see purple, you're animating the drawings, which we don't want to do. All right, so now get rid of all that. So we got rid of the keyframes there. So we have the upper arm. So I can move this with the animation tool. Animation is turned on. Now before we want to start animating, this is where we need to do a little bit of cleanup in the timeline. So I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so I have enough room to move my arm. Now in the timeline, I can see all my different nodes. I can see the layers. We can see how things are indented in. If I go into my node view over here, again, we have this whole structure. Upper arm master to the upper arm, lower arm master to the lower arm and hand. So we can see how we have that parent-child relationship. Then we have the torso. Now what I could do is add in one more peg. So I'll just hit P or Command P. I'm going to just name this here. Pegs are typically named with a dash P. So I'll just call this my master dash P. And this is my master peg. The master peg is going to control both the arm and the torso. Now, you may be thinking, wow, this is starting to look kind of like cable salad here. There's a lot of things going on, but it's what we need to make it work. So now if I zoom out, change my view over here, I'm going to just select those two nodes, grab my rotate tool, and I'm going to just put a peg here, because now if I wanted to rotate the whole thing, I could do that. If I just want to rotate or adjust the body, I can just click on that and hit B, it moves it up. So right now, when you're beginning to animate, I would encourage you to set up your structure, get your nodes. Notice how I have a vertical alignment. Nodes that share the same pivot location are vertically aligned with each other, and they go straight into the drawing node that they're affecting. That is considered good organization. Do you have to do it that way? No. But if you're going to work at a studio, it would be expected that that would be how you would organize your nodes so that it's easy to follow. You want, if someone else were to open up your project, that they can understand what you've done. And when we start adding in more things and things get more and more complex, it is really important to make sure that we are organizing things effectively. To begin animating with the transform tool, again, we make sure that animation is on. We see the yellow running man, not off. We can set it up so that we're on peg selection mode to make it easy, because if we turn that off, every time I click on a layer, it is showing me it selected the drawing layer. Notice my pivot point is in the center of the screen, so I have to hit B to move up to a node. So it's much easier to just have peg selection node on, so I can click on the hand, I can click on the forearm, I can click on the upper arm, I hit B, it now chooses the whole arm. If I hit B again, I get the entire character. Now, right now, our artwork is only 1 frame long, but when we're animating, the best way to do it, and what we're going to do is we're going to do some straight ahead animation here. We'll see how we can do it with motion keyframes turned on, so we'll get some automatic in-betweening, all kinds of good stuff, taking advantage of what Harmony has to offer. So the first thing is I need to close on my master peg. So now if you notice, we see effectively nothing in the timeline. We just see it says master peg, it's got the peg icon next to it, and there's something in frame 1, go to frame 2, nothing. So we need to extend our artwork out. So I'll go out to frame 60 and I'll use the function key F5. That now extends out my artwork. Now I'm going to go in frame 1 and insert a keyframe. Keyframe is F6 off the keyboard. Now I want to set my starting pose. I don't think I want to start with my arm all the way up. I'm going to start with my arm more at the side, and I want to raise the arm. So maybe we're playing rock, paper, scissors, or it's a cowboy shootout, or whatever your imagination tells you. And remember, you don't have to do human or humanoid. You could be animating a lobster or a spider or an alien creature. Have fun with it, make it your own. So now that I've done that, I'm going to click on off the character, click on the upper arm. I can see how it shows the upper arm peg. I hit B, now it chooses the entire arm. Now we're going to rotate this down, and then I will click off, and I'm just going to put a little bit of bend in the elbow here. So it's just kind of hanging in a more natural position. So that is my first frame, and I'm going to let that be a hold frame. So I'm going to go out and insert another keyframe here with no real change. So I'm going to click at this and insert. So now if I were to move anything, we could see how it affects everything. We can see how we are getting a little bit of a change. I'm just going to click the eyeball, turn off my drawing layer. Another thing that you can do when a layer is active, the letter A makes it active, the letter D disables it. So I just hit D. It's the same as clicking the eyeballs for it. I hit A, it comes back, D, it goes away. That way when I'm on frame 1, it just doesn't bug me. So I'm putting a little bit of forward lean on everything here at that frame. Now I'm going to go over a couple more frames, and at this point I am going to start moving my arm back before it goes forward. So this is now moving the arm back. Again, every pose every keyframe we should be hitting F6. Now I'm just going to select it, I hit B, put a little bend in the arm. So we can see, and so we're bending at the elbow. And now I'm going to give myself enough frames to move my way out here. And with that, I'm going to rotate everything back. Because I'm on the master peg, it did insert a full keyframe. When you see a white square, so if we're in between and if I were to just animate the arm, we'll see a white square. And that tells me that there's a keyframe on some of the drawing layers, but not a keyframe for every layer. So now we pulled the body back. Now I'm going to rotate the arm up. So we can see how it rotates it up. And as I'm rotating up here, I do want to insert a keyframe. Put more bend in the arm. So we can bring the arm up. And now I'm going to move over my handful of frames. Click in the timeline, F6. Now click off. So when you have things selected, if you hit escape on the keyboard, it also deselects everything. But escape isn't convenient for where my hand is on the keyboard. So you can see it goes up with the arm bent and then it comes back. And with this, I'm going to rotate the hand a little bit here. Going over 2 frames, F6. And then I'm going over 2 more frames, F6, pull back. So now we can move the arm. Now I may decide that along the way, because as I bring the arm up, I want to put a little more lean in. And because we have these later keyframes, so if I change something in the middle, it doesn't affect what's happening later. So we can start to adjust that timing and figure out how we want it to work. Another approach is that you could start with the beginning and end pose and then figure out how you want to get there. So you decide how long you want something to take, and we put those keyframes in the timeline. So I'm going to just delete these keyframes that don't want to do that, just keyframe minus. So I have my starting keyframe, and let's say I want to go out to here. That's my ending keyframe. So I'm going to bring the arm up. Hit escape, click on the hand, go down. So that's my, now if we look at this, that's very robotic. It's just the arm is going up. So what I want to do is from the starting position, what I'm going to do is go over a few frames and we can think about, what's going to happen. We can break it down and come up with in the middle, but what I first want to do is work on that breakdown of, I'm going to click F6, rotate. So he's going to rotate forward quite a bit. Select the arm. Arm is going back. What I want to do on the arm going back here now is in the middle of that. Oh, missed. So I have the arm bending as it's going back. And now as I start to go forward with the arm, I'm actually going to rotate the hand back, put a little bit of drag in it. As the arm is going forward. And now so what we can do sometimes, because if we're right here, all the way back, here's all the way forward, let's find the middle keyframe. I can click on that middle keyframe and hit F6. Now I can take that middle keyframe and push it almost all the way, so we're going slow and then it goes faster. Now I don't want to go quite that far because I want to do one more thing in between, but now I took what was in the middle and I've adjusted that time lapse. It's kind of like adding in some easing, but now as that arm is coming forward, I want to really pull, so he's leaning into it. And then, so if this is our ending, now we're going to continue here. And I'm going to go, so if that's the end, we can just copy that keyframe, and I'm going to go over 4 frames, paste it. So it's effectively holding, and now I want to do some overshoot here. So I'm going to go past this, and so if I select the hand, of course I can just go up a little bit on that with B, so we're up and then back to here. So now if we compare, that's definitely starting to add in a lot more motion. Now there's a lot more I could do, because more often than not when people animate, we make it all go so fast. We want to put all this stuff in and we do it every frame or every 2 frames, and we put so much motion in that the eye can't follow it, and we don't really ever hold on anything or take our time. So it really is important to spend some time figuring out how you want to build that and make it happen so that it becomes more enjoyable to watch.